So today we're going to be on lesson 12, which is I can stop making excuses and start facing the truth. So this series, of course, is I can do it. I can be a Christian. And we've talked about 11 things that we can do in Christ. But what are some excuses you have heard for why people don't want to study the Bible, don't want to learn more about Christ, maybe don't believe in God to begin with? What are some excuses you have heard? I'm too busy. Okay, I'm too busy. I don't have time. Any others? Not enough evidence for God. I just don't feel Him present. I've heard that.
Sometimes family.
Family.
My husband, my wife, my children, and they're just other.
Yeah, I've heard that too. In fact, I think you told me that yesterday about like I said, I don't want to become a Christian because I don't know what I'll do about this family member or that family member. Like I've heard the excuse, sadly, that well, my parents weren't Christians; they're gone now, and why would, like as far as I'd never see them again if Christ is true. And I found that a pretty weird excuse in the sense that if your parents could come back to you and tell you, they wouldn't want you to be there. We learned that in the rich man and Lazarus.
It sort of sits in a big group of emotional reasons.
Yeah, emotional. Yeah, Gord, you had something?
I'm a good person.
Like I started saying, I'm a good person. Surely God would accept me. I'm not an evildoer, like what we talked about last week.
If a Christian disappointed him and his ways are not right and pleasing to God, what am I coming there for?
Yeah, an excuse, hypocrisy. Like as far as I'm not. Christians are no better than everyone else. They act the same as everyone else. So why should I join myself to that? And so excuses for why we don't obey God is nothing new. We go back to the beginning, and we're going to find the exact same thing. So let's turn in our Bibles to Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3. What was the only law, the first law given to man?
You can eat everything but
Of knowledge of good and evil. So you may eat of every tree in the garden, except for the tree of knowledge of good and evil. For in the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. So that was the law. That was the rule. As far as rules go, we would think, oh, that's a pretty easy rule. And in some regards it is. But then we have what happens in Genesis 3. Let's read Genesis 3, verses 1 to 5. Okay. We'll start with Dave. We'll do 2 verses each. Dave and then Heather and whoever wants to read verses 1 through 5.
Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, Has God indeed said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, You may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die.
Then the serpent said to the woman, You will not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.
Okay. So, what was the temptation here? The devil came along. How did he tempt Eve?
He twisted the truth.
How did he twist it?
You shall surely not die.
All right. So
They were thinking when God told them possible physical death.
yeah, and you can sort of you can see the devil going at and impugning the integrity of God. Why did he say that God didn't want them to eat of the tree? To become like God. He doesn't want you to become like him, knowing good and evil. He's keeping something from you. That was the temptation. He was saying you're not. He was saying God's lying to you. That he's not. He doesn't care if you die or not. You won't die. He's lying to you. In fact, not only is he lying to you, he's keeping something from you. He doesn't want you to be like him. He said he made you in his image, but you're not like him. If you eat of that tree, you'll be like him. The devil did that. And let's get verse 6. Sorry. Oh, Lord, I didn't see that.
If somebody told me that if you drink this potion, you will die, I wouldn't do it.
Well, we say that.
It's just like, is it worth the risk?
We say that.
Because
but,
so if you told me, and I don't know you, and say, no, you won't die.
Well,
who are you? I can't trust you.
Well, but I will say, when we get to what Eve did, there's a reason Eve succumbed to that. Because, we usually say, oh, I wouldn't do that. And yet I see people doing foolish things all the time that we would say, how come you ever did that? Didn't you know? But let's get verse 6. And we'll get Annie to get Genesis 3, verse 6.
So when the woman saw that the tree was good for fruit, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate.
That's the thing. It looked good. It looked like it was tasty. It wasn't a piece of garbage. It had an odorous smell. It was like, why would I want to eat that? No. The temptation was there. We do some silly things. And so I always warn people, we say, well, I wouldn't do it if it said I would die. Well, I wouldn't be so confident in that. Things are desirable. Things look good, and if things look good, sometimes people will do that. Doesn't matter if it's sinful or not. People drink alcohol all the time. And we know the consequences of that. People know the consequences of that. They've seen people die from alcoholism, from drunk driving, and yet people do that all the time. People smoke, even though they know lung cancer is a very high likelihood of a side effect of that. But people do it for reasons that. So we can't say that. I don't want to get off on the other thing, but I'm saying this was a temptation. This was a deceptive temptation of the devil, and it was a temptation that could have been overcome by saying, the Lord said, "We will die. I'm not going to do it." But that's not what happened. Bill.
It's interesting how well Satan knows man's nature.
Mm-hmm.
Because even before he states the question, he's already causing us to doubt by saying, has God really said? Right away, he's attacked God's integrity in our hearts.
Yeah. And that's really what Satan did. Satan didn't come along and just right off the bat and say, you need to eat that. He gave what sounded like good reasons as to why it was okay. He was very smooth in how he taught. Con men are like that all the time. Con men will come along and they're not going to tell you all the bad things they'll have, but they'll usually tell you all the good things. Oh, you want this, you want that. And that's what the devil did. So we know the consequences. I'll get you just a sec, Jeff. We know the consequences. Their eyes were both opened. They knew that they were naked, and they sewed themselves fig leaves. They were ashamed. They now knew what it was like to disobey God, and it was a separation from God. That's something that up until that time man had not experienced, because God is holy, God is just, God does not and will not accept sin. Jeff.
Our first question.
Yeah, I'm getting.
Excuses.
Yeah, which we're about to get.
I automatically think of the excuses that they made to God.
Yes.
But I realized when I was looking through that, is the first excuse that Eve made was to herself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good point.
She looked at that and she basically excused herself from keeping God's command
by looking at it and reasoning in her mind why this was actually okay. Well, it looked good.
Yeah.
Looks like it tastes good.
Yeah.
And it will give me something that I think I should have.
Yeah.
She had to make that excuse in her own mind.
Yeah, justify it in her own mind. That's absolutely right. I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point. Because we often will run to the excuses that they gave to God, because those are quite clear. But we often will justify bad behavior with something that makes it sound like it's not so bad, or that there was good reason why I did this. We had said the temptation was able to be overcome if we had listened, if Eve had listened to what God said. If Eve had done what Lord said, which was, why am I going to chance death? I've never experienced death. I've never seen death. I don't know what that's like. And so, you're going to kill me. And so, they didn't obey. So let's get to the excuses that they actually gave God. Because they knew they were naked. They hid themselves from God. God asked them, where are you? Well, we were naked, so we hid ourselves. And God said, well, who told you you were naked? And let's get, have you eaten of the tree? Have you eaten of the tree of knowledge of good and evil that I commanded you not to eat? So let's get Adam's excuse to God in verse 12. And we'll come up to Henry to get verse 12 of Genesis 3.
Then the man said, the woman who you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate.
Okay, what was Adam's excuse? There were two of them. All right, he blamed the woman and God. It was the woman's fault, and you gave me the woman, so it's your fault too.
Where's the devil?
Well, yeah, the devil wasn't there. He was there,
he wasn't
but
there to defend them.
yeah, the devil didn't step up.
I convinced her. No, he
no.
threw them under the bus in a way, just let them suffer the consequences.
Yeah, the Adam blamed the woman, and he blamed God. Was there fault with the woman? Yes, but that's not an excuse as to why Adam needed to sin. And there was no fault with God. But that was an excuse. What was the woman's excuse? Let's get verse 13. We'll come to Tim.
Then the Lord God said to the woman, what is this you have done? The woman said, the serpent deceived me, and I ate.
What was the woman's excuse? It was the serpent's fault. I ate because the serpent deceived me. Serpent tricked me. We have that. We do that sometimes for reasons as to why I've done something. Well, I was tricked. I didn't know. And yet God did not accept these excuses. Why not? They did know. They had the ability to know because God gave them the law. When he asked them, have you eaten of the tree of knowledge that I commanded you not to eat? God knew the answer to that. It was yes. But, so we know that they knew. What's another reason? They were responsible. They did not have to yield to temptation. When we sin, it's our fault. We can't come along and say, well, they tempted me. I've heard this unfortunately in some rape charges where they say, well, the woman, she dressed too provocatively. She might have been dressed provocatively, I don't know. But that's no excuse for assault. He angered me, so I punched him. Well, he might have angered you, but that can give you an excuse as to why you had to act the way you did. God has given us his word. God gave Adam and Eve his word. They understood his word because Eve told the serpent what God had said. She added a little bit to it. But she could recite to the devil, God said, don't do this. Made of every tree in the garden except for the tree of knowledge. You can't come along and claim ignorance. You can't come along and claim that she misunderstood. Deception is not an excuse that God will accept for sin. Because we can know what God's word says. We have to study it, but we can know. Cal.
So James 1:14 it says, but each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then when lust is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. So really, we can't blame anyone.
We're carried away by our own lusts. And that's really the lesson, is that the truth of the matter is Adam and Eve were responsible. The truth of the matter is we're responsible. We can know the truth. We have the ability to know the truth. And we can obey the truth. We're going to get away from ourselves if we don't go on, Bill, just very quickly, and then we have to move on to question 2.
I just thought it's interesting that God pronounced judgment on the deceiver.
Yes. Oh, he did do that.
They were all judged, yes.
Yeah.
But the deceiver.
Yeah.
Kind of
Notice the serpent didn't speak. I don't know if it's just the devil just didn't have an excuse. He didn't desire an excuse. He did what he did. He wasn't really upset with it, with what he did. And sometimes we just say, I did it. Who cares? That's a high-handed sin where you just don't care that you've done it anymore. So in Exodus 3 and 4, we're not going to read Exodus 3 and 4. We don't, that's a long reading. But Moses was told by God to go to Egypt, talk to Pharaoh, and get Pharaoh to let Israel go. Moses didn't want to go. And so I'm hoping people have gone through and seen the excuses that Moses gave God. What are some of the excuses? All right. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? I'm not a great person. I'm not like I started standing before Pharaoh. I'm not the person. What else?
The children of Israel.
Well, in chapter 4, it was what happens if the children of Israel won't hear my voice. They might not believe. What else?
I'm not eloquent enough to speak.
I'm not eloquent. I don't know whether it seemed that Moses stuttered. That like as far as he said, I get tripped over my tongue. Whether that's a speech impediment or whatever. I know when people have speech impediments, it does inhibit some people to talk. But instead of allowing that to get in the way of doing what we need to do, we can seek help for that. What was God's answer to Moses on especially that last one? I'm not eloquent enough to speak. I'll speak through Aaron. You'll speak to Aaron. Aaron will speak. There's always a solution to the excuses we make. God chose Moses. We can let excuses for why we won't do right, because Moses wasn't saying, I don't want to sin here. Moses wasn't going to do right. God told him. Moses didn't trust in God to be able, at that time anyway, to be able to do what God said he would do. Do you really think God would have chosen Moses and then left him on his own? I don't. God would have found a way. Moses might have said, well, Moses asked the questions. God gave him an answer every time. To the what happens if Israel won't believe me? What was his solution there?
It said
Okay, there's that. But what happens if they won't believe him then?
Gave him signs to show the people.
Gave him signs to show the people. That was God's solution. He says, okay, you don't think Israel will listen to you? Here's signs. You don't think you can stand before Pharaoh? I will go before you. I will be the one who will convince Pharaoh. It will not be you. It will be me. You don't think you can talk? I'll put the words in your mouth. You'll give them to Aaron. He'll talk. God had enough of Moses' excuses. God made a choice. It was God's choice. Moses did go, and Moses did obey. But God wasn't going to put up with Moses' excuses. So he doesn't put up with excuses as to why we don't, or why we do wrong. And he doesn't put up with excuses as to why we don't do right. I can't teach the gospel. I'm not a good speaker. Well, you might not be a good speaker, but there's always something you can do. You can't invite a friend out to a Bible study. You can't defend the basic part of your faith. You can't tell someone, okay, well, why do you act this? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? What do you actually believe? You can't say you might not be able to preach. You might not be able to lead a Bible class. You might not be able to quote the entire scriptures. You might not be able to do that. We should grow in our ability to teach the gospel. But some of us will never grow to the ability to be elders. We're women, we can't. But some men may never marry. Some men may not have children. Some men, unfortunately, their children may not grow up to be Christians. And some men just never will mature to the point to be elders. But that doesn't mean they can, I can't be an elder, so therefore I have no responsibility whatsoever. Or a woman can't come, I can't be an elder, I can't be a preacher, therefore I can't do anything. No, we all have things to do, and God will not accept an excuse as to why we can't do the things we're going to do, and we'll get into that in question 3. Gord.
Well, let's look at the parable of the talents.
Yeah.
One got 1 talent, one got 5, one got 10. You use the talent you're given.
Yeah.
Not everybody's meant to be preachers.
No.
Everybody's meant to be song leaders.
Yeah.
We do with the talent that we have.
We do what we
and
can.
We can still strive to grow in other things.
Yeah.
But start. Can you lead a prayer?
Yeah. Can you read?
Invite people to a study.
Yeah. Can you tell them the basics of how you became a Christian? We have to sometimes get over fear of rejection, fear of inadequacy, because that can be the root of a lot of what our problems are. Moses was afraid to stand before Pharaoh. Remember, Moses fled Egypt because he killed an Egyptian. I don't believe this is the same Pharaoh that he ran from. Moses was in Egypt for 40 years, in Midian for 40 years. I don't believe this is the same Pharaoh. But I do believe his fear was real. And sometimes we've talked about fear all the time in this study. That fear can be gripping. Naomi, can you answer that? Fear can be gripping, and but God can bring us through if we read and meditate and grow in His Word. Bill.
Brings to mind the important stuff of having a Barnabas attitude.
Yeah.
Of encouragement.
Yeah.
You can encourage people men along.
Yes.
To get over fears.
Yes.
And by letting them know that it's perfect.
Yeah. And that's sometimes the thing, is that we desire to be perfect. We desire to We desire to think that, well, if I don't say it exactly the right way, I could turn them off. Well, we have to recognize that, yes, nobody is perfect. But as an encourager, we can understand we're not alone. Other Christians can say, look, do what you can. Remember, Mary did what she could. She couldn't stop Christ from going to the cross. She couldn't do a lot of things, but she did what she could. And the Lord was pleased with that. And so let's remember that as we go day to day. Now let's go to the parable of the Great Supper, the time we have left. In Jesus' parable of the Great Supper in Luke 14, verses 16 to 24, what excuses are given by the three men for not coming to the feast, and what was the master's response? We're not going to read the entire parable, but we will read some of the responses. So remember, there was a certain man, he had a great supper, he invited many. He sent out his servant, saying, come, for all things are now ready. That's where our song, All Things Are Ready, Come to the Feast, comes from. It's based on this parable. But we had three people all make excuses. Let's get, we are to Sandy, I think. Luke chapter 14. We'll do one verse each. We'll start with Sandy, and whoever wants to read going around, and then we'll come back to Francis after we finish up with the back. 18 through 24.
Still another say, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come.
I think we'll come back to Abigail or Dexter. 21.
So that servant came and reported these things to his master. Then the master of the house, being angry, said to his servant, go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in here the poor and the maimed and the lame and the blind. And the servant said, Master, it is done as you commanded, and still there is room.
We'll come to Dexter if he wants to, 23 and 24.
Then the master said to the servant, go out into a highway and hedges and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I say to you that none of those men who were invited shall taste my supper.
Okay. So, excuse number one.
Bought a piece of land and I have to go and see it.
All right. Why is that a poor excuse?
Shouldn't you see the land before you buy it?
That's the excuse. There's not many things we buy sight unseen. Now, in today's day and age, you go to eBay, you go to Facebook Marketplace, you go to sometimes you do buy some things sight unseen, but you're not going to buy a piece of land. If you're buying something sight unseen, it's usually $1, $5, maybe $10. But if it's $100, most people won't part with $100 if they haven't seen it. And so I went and bought a piece of land. I have to go see it. That's a poor excuse. Second excuse. I have to go test the oxen, see if they're good, see if they're actually good for plowing. Again, this is a bad excuse for that reason. And then, poor woman. But what's the third? What's the third excuse? And I cannot come. Now, that's putting the onus on the wife. It's her fault. I would come, But my wife, she won't let me come. That's another poor excuse. Now, we know the master didn't accept these excuses. What did he do instead? What was his reaction? He was very angry. Again, because these were poor excuses. Not I'm sick and don't want to get everyone else sick. Not that I fell and broke my leg today and I can't come because I can't move. There are reasons. Sometimes there are reasons, valid reasons, as to why we can't do something that we would normally do. But these were not reasons. These were excuses as to why these people couldn't do what they should have done. The master became angry because of it. And what did he do as a result? There were two things. Okay, so go out. We're going to fill this place with people who want to come. So go out, find all these people. And of course, he went and did that, and there was still room. All right, go to the highways and compel anyone to come. Get anyone. We'll take the poor. We'll take those in need. They can come. And there's even more room. Whoever else is left, go out and get them. Tell them to come. The master has told you to come. There's a feast. All things are ready. Come to it. And so, what do you say in verse 24? What about those who were originally invited? They cannot come. Now, when you think about it, Jesus is not telling this parable in a vacuum. Where is he? Where is he? Oh, he's in Jerusalem, but if you back up to verse 7. So he told the parable to those who were invited when he noticed they chose the best place, saying to them, and then we had the parable of the wedding feast. Now when those who sat at the table with him heard these things, blessed is he who eats bread in the kingdom of God. These parables weren't told in a vacuum. Who was Jesus inviting to become his disciples? All of Israel. They were invited to come. Yet they kept giving excuses as to why they could not. Why? What were some of the excuses that we can think of? They weren't said specifically here, but we can know by their actions that people were giving excuses as to why they wouldn't be disciples of Jesus. What were some of those excuses? All right, disbelief. I just don't have enough evidence. Even though he had performed miracle after miracle, and in this chapter had healed a man who had the dropsy healed on the Sabbath. He healed a man. He talked to the Pharisees about this. It was clear that he was the Son of God, yet the excuse was, well, I just can't believe. I just can't know for sure.
And part of that was holding fast to their cultural tradition.
Yeah. And I believe that's another excuse, is holding, like, as far as, well, Jesus is saying, don't follow the law of Moses. I can't do that. Jesus wasn't saying, don't follow the law of Moses, but that's what they heard. That's what they believed. They gave excuse after excuse. He said he's going to destroy this temple and build it in 3 days. How can we accept a man like that? He's telling me that I have to love my enemy, do good to those who despitefully use me and persecute me. That can't possibly be the truth. Doesn't the law of Moses say an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth? Doesn't say that. Excuse after excuse, and then just pure hatred. I just don't like Jesus. And there are many excuses that people gave. There, like as far as you think of the rich young ruler, he loved money. He was greatly sorrowful. Jeff?
Those three things that Jesus put in that parable. The land, it's like
Yeah.
a personal possession.
Yeah.
The oxen, I think it signified business.
Yeah.
And a wife, family life.
Yeah.
Maybe he put those things there. Jesus included those things to signify what we are tempted to value more.
Yeah. Very
value
good.
those things more
Thank God.
than God.
Yeah. Things that get ahead of God. Aiden.
When I think about Matthew 22 and the parable of the marriage feast, we may not make excuses sometimes, but we may not do it right. So
Yeah.
in Matthew 22, it talks about the king hosting a feast, wedding feast for his son, and people came, but there was someone who wasn't dressed in the wedding clothes. Now, when I first read that, I was like, well, that's a bit harsh. Well, when you understand the tradition, when kings hosted a feast, they would have the wedding clothes ready.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't have to go buy them. It didn't matter if you were too poor for them. They provided it for you. So it doesn't matter if sometimes we may not make excuses, but we do it, but we don't do it right.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, like I said, maybe I don't want to wear it. And I hear that today. I apply that to baptism today, or to other types of obedience today, that people say, well, I just can't do that. Well, the Lord doesn't accept excuses. He didn't in Genesis 3, he didn't in Exodus 3 and 4, and he doesn't in Jesus' parables either. We need to start facing the truth that God expects that we do what he says for the reason he said it. So as we conclude today, we have to think about, do I try to think more of others and less about myself? Do I put too much of an emphasis on insignificant things? Well, that's last week. I'm saying, well, that's not right today. This one's. Do I find myself making excuses when I really need reasons for my actions? Am I too eager to justify myself in the things that I do? Am I unwilling to face facts as they are? Do I find myself making excuses for the wrongdoings of those I love? Can I accept the fact that there is no excuse for not doing God's will? And do I ever pray that God will help me to fulfill my duties rather than try to find excuses to avoid them? I'm not ashamed to own my Lord, nor